had to wait a moment to think about this one. I tried to actually catch, like, what was it that was so odd to me about this? And then, I was like, no, mull it over. And it was something in the verbiage. But it was this, it was when during Destiny's, hot atheist take, one of the things he challenged Lauren Chen and John Doyle on is this idea of, and he said this, and this is very important, that for America, the socialists and the leftists, of which Destiny is still still in that realm. Like he can't really get that America didn't thrive off of some kind of oddball collectivism. That it was that people formed organizations that helped the poor. And he can't believe this because he won't look into it, and which is very normal. That people think in America that people let other people simply starve, and that sort of, I guess they would have to figure that families and churches fed people. And people don't really get that America has had benevolence societies similar to the Italians, the Chinese immigrants, Polish immigrants. They all had various benevolence societies. And this also allowed for them to form, to buy houses, save money, tutor their kids, things like that. And so a lot of people just didn't have this. Like somebody who, as I remember, Destiny is from Nebraska. In his part of the country, I believe it would have been the Grange movement that would have actually been the way that a lot of people organized to do various things. And because there is this desperate need for some reason for the left to not associate themselves with their origin, which is in many cases Freemasonic and quasi-Freemasonic movements, that they won't look into them, and the import they held in the Eurosphere and specifically the Anglosphere, and how that model was used by almost every single ethnic group in the society at some point to form various forms of benevolent societies, including Black Americans. Black Americans have their own Masonic lodge unto itself. So the next thing that I was thinking, I'm like, okay, so then it was moving backwards, that TradCon, going back to TradCon ways. And as I point out, because of Robert Briefolt's The Mothers, actually, so the sexual revolution is that was backward. The sexual revolution, so what really Destiny is the backward movement. That's why he can never be assured if his woman's just going to leave him. He can't really. He doesn't even have a vow from her that she will stay with him for the rest of her life. She doesn't have to do that. If she finds happiness elsewhere, she could be happy with that person, blah, blah, blah. Who knows what kind of kooky psychological thing he would have to put himself through to be like, it's cool. But that's what the deal is. Now, anybody who, when you kind of know the score, you're like, bro, she's got everything she could want. You're this very average-looking man who for now has a good deal of money, and you'll let her have sex with whoever she likes. Like, either you're her pimp, or you're both her pimp and a hoe at the same time. Like, and that's, and especially being that if I understand correctly, she does online streaming kind of stuff, so she also has her own income stream. And so to some degree, one of the things that Destiny can tell people is, if you want to be kind of a liberal simp broham, this is the way to do it. you know, you and some girl team up, and you basically come up with what really is just a business opportunity. Then beyond that, see, the thing is, he wants to believe that somebody like him could have a healthy, like, family. And so people keep trying to posit this idea that the nuclear family is something foreign. Now, it's some weird idea to humanity. Why? Where are they getting that? Because they're not getting it from most of continental Europe. They're not getting it from the steppes. They're not. Where are they getting it from? They're getting it from models of African villagers that are really at the stage that their society it has barely functional agriculture. And are also the groups that are the most likely to be dominated by stronger groups. Those stronger groups would have matrilineal and patrilineal lineage, where you would have things, and your family would pass things on. It's also the myth that nuclear families don't exist on the African continent. This is where all criticisms of the nuclear family, at some point, you have some white intellectual looking at you, telling you about some randos on an entire continent of Africa, when it's like one of the first places that Christianity anchored itself by conversion was North and Western Africa. In fact, that's where the name Maurice comes from, because of Saint Maurice, one of the most important saints in Catholicism, the Black Saint Maurice, and his army that he let the Pope use. But knowing something like that is knowledge. It's not feelings about, I think that two mommies could probably raise a boy into a man quite successfully. And when you live around that, you know that that's not true. That you know that most of the time two mommies raise a guy who has face tattoos, knuckle tattoos, and probably some bastards. More likely than not. So it's that's the whole deal with it, is that it's this myth that the liberals raise their kids super fucking well. And the liberals don't raise their kids super well. When you're around liberal enclaves, when you've grown up in a liberal enclave, you know that. That's my entire experience growing up. Broken home kids are the kids who steal cars, because mom can't stop them, because mom is too physically weak, and it's too easy to overwhelm her. So that destiny, see, and then what you eventually get are men like destiny everywhere. Now, when you're in a liberal enclave, there's some of you who will be able to say, like, yeah, I see that. That in the enclaves you'll see there'll be these guys who will show up from the countryside, and they're huge. The liberal enclave produces men who are like 5'7". Like the tall guy is 5'7". And they're smaller than their dad. That's the liberal enclave. It's slightly taller than mom, but smaller than dad. And so it's really one of these things of like, yeah, that's what it produces. A man like Destiny, who is exceedingly average looking. Like Destiny would be totally lost in a crowd of unattractive men. He makes decent money. He doesn't really have a very good personality. He's just not a very interesting person. I don't get it. I don't get I've never gotten it. I think it has something to do with also wanting to see the video games he plays. So I mean, like, probably some people would be like, well, you watch Ashtarothi, and I'm like, okay, I see what you mean. But this idea of people can't revert to the tradcon way, and it's like, no, that's the most advanced form of people reproducing and passing on the best to their young. Like, that's the most advanced way. That's why it's difficult. It's like doing the most advanced form of catch wrestling. It's hard. It's very difficult to do, but it's there's ways of wrestling that would be easier to learn, and so so that's kind of the thing, is he wants to think that, like many people, well, it's so hard, it doesn't work right, it's this model that isn't easy. It's a model that isn't easy. And also then there's this. He's still young. He's still a relatively young man. He hasn't seen all of the many ways relationships fail. All just, and then raw misfortune. Everybody knows someone that, if not for their significant other, they would have died. They would have died. And now the whole, I'm MGTOW, so a lot of this about like getting married, I'm like, yeah, it's by the numbers, not a good deal for you, fella. It's but I have to like counter this, because what he was saying is kind of a myth, that what he's doing is like the way of the future or something like that. It's like, actually, it absolutely isn't. Not only is there no evidence for that, what he's basing this on is completely about societies that are collapsing, of mostly the Eurosphere, compared to something like societies of the traditionalist societies, something like the Ummah, or what's happening in India. And in those kind of societies, the idea that marriage is still very important and key to people's happiness is that's just the norm, and that it's important for the legacy of families. Now, this is also then the big thing. How do you sell the mother-in-law? This is a very important one, because Brifolt brings this up, and this was something that I remember thinking about, and I'm like, oh, gotta remember this. People don't understand that the mother-in-law had to always be kind of, she came with the package. It was a package deal. And usually the mother-in-law was always it was a force that the bridegroom feared, always. And to the point that the mother-in-law would be known for like her almost violent anger. And this is in lots and lots and lots of cultures, and it's the downside of marriage. You have to take care of her mother at some point. Now, also the idea is that you have to take care of your own family too. But that quite specifically, and I found that very interesting. Like that idea that this pervaded, India, Africa, like he went over all these things where the mother-in-law was this force to be feared, and people didn't like getting married because of the responsibility in almost every society that he went through. The thing is, there was no way that your kids wouldn't be destitute and pretty much slaves without you getting married and having a successful marriage. And it was because you wouldn't pass your property on. They wouldn't be prepared afterward. And if they did come from a really good married home, they would end up having enough property that they would be able to marry upward in society. And that happens constantly. Other people move downward in society. Shirt sleeves to, button-ups to shirt sleeves or something like that in a generation. I forget how that's put. Button down to shirt sleeves. And so this is, it was just something I was considering, because there's a lot of this kind of thing of like, oh, polyam's the future. And it's like, polyam was the past. like how do, and then I'm like, yeah, of course you wouldn't know that because we never discussed that in discussions of history, and and the gender sexuals don't bring it up in studying like human sexuality and all those kind of classes that you're forced to take nowadays. So yeah, just a thought.